Well, hello there, and I hope that you're having a wonderful day. I wanted to do my Facebook Live a little bit early this week. Normally it is on the last Wednesday of each month, but because tomorrow is Halloween, I thought I would do it today because I know we're all going to be really busy tomorrow. And in fact, that is what I want to talk about because I asked some of you guys what would be a good topic for today, and I heard Halloween, which makes a lot of sense because Halloween can be really difficult for some of our anxious kids. So I want to go into some things that you can do to make Halloween better tomorrow because I love Halloween. It is my favorite holiday, almost more than Christmas, almost. And I had really struggled with my anxious kids because when they were little, they really had a hard time with Halloween because Halloween can be really spooky and it can be really creepy. So it doesn't have to be that way. And there are some things that you can do as a parent to make Halloween fun and exciting and not a holiday that your kids just can't be part of. So I'm going to go over some basic things that impact kids of all ages around Halloween. So I'm going to talk about some things that maybe impact little kids more, and then I'm going to talk about some things that impact big kids too. Because when you have an anxious mind, just anything that's spooky or scary can impact you. So the first thing I want to talk about is a really basic thing, and that is the costume. When I had really little kids, and my oldest, who's 15, has sensory processing issues, the costume itself was a nightmare. So if you have a child that doesn't like tags, doesn't like tight things, doesn't like scratchy things, you really want to pay attention to the costume. I would get really disappointed because I would spend I'd spend like $20 on a costume, and my oldest daughter, when she was little, she would not wear it. And it was really frustrating and upsetting, and we would get into fights about it because I'd like, this is the one you picked. This is the costume you wanted. And it wasn't her fault, it was her skin. So for those of you that have kids with sensory issues, you definitely want to get cozy costumes. Somebody in the private Facebook group mentioned using pajamas that are a costume already. That's an awesome idea. I had to let go of the expectation that, my kid was going to have the most beautiful costume. So thank you, Sharon, for joining me. It was starting to feel kind of lonely. So I am doing this mainly for Sharon because she's the one that requested this Facebook Live. But I'm sure that a lot of you need this extra help as well. So I am talking about costumes first. I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things that are going to be related to different ages. So if we're talking about something that doesn't relate to your kid, hang in there because there's something for everybody. So costumes, find something that's comfortable. Have them wear it today. If it's sitting there in a plastic bag and you haven't taken it out yet, a good thing to do is take it out and have your child wear it around today. Get them acclimated to the costume because you don't want to. Thank you for joining me, April. It's good to see you. And Sarah, I appreciate you guys popping on. And hopefully I can give you some tips that are going to help make Halloween fun because I love Halloween. So first thing, get some cozy costumes. Have them try it out today. Those are for your sensory kids. I know my oldest was like that. The second thing I want to talk about is the spookiness of Halloween. So a lot of times, so April said, this is why we ordered 4 different costumes. I would do that with my oldest. She had thank you for joining us, Tracy. She had major SPD issues, and my other 2 kids aren't that bad, but she was super bad. And I would buy multiple costumes. And finally, she normally would go in her regular clothes and wear like a little t-shirt that said Happy Halloween. But it made for a better night. So definitely explore that with your kids. We have a very spooky neighborhood, and I don't know why. I mean, it's cool. People go way out of their way to freak out other kids. And so they'll set up very intricate doorways. There'll be people who be hiding and they'll pop out. I don't know what your neighborhood is like, but my neighborhood gets way into Halloween, which is awesome. But for anxious kids, it's really scary. And so when my kids were a little bit younger, they would be terrified to go to certain houses. So one thing that I suggest, if you have a child who's a little bit younger or who just gets really freaked out by those things, have a scout. I know that sounds kind of weird, but you want to have somebody in your party go to the door first. So when my kids were really, like when Miss 6 was Miss 5, she would get really freaked out. And so my husband and her brother would go to the door first and make sure, like all the pop outs and the scary things were okay. And then they would call her and they'd say, it's okay, come on. And that way we kind of mitigate a little bit of the panic going door to door. So that would be with fear. That was a really important one because you don't want your child to have PTSD because every door they go to, there's something super creepy. People think it's funny to answer the door in really scary ways, and it's great for most kids, but if you have an anxious kid, that can be kind of traumatizing. So have somebody go to the door first. Thank you for joining, Amber. I appreciate it. Okay, so we've covered costumes, we've covered fear, and then we have to talk about the amazing amount of overstimulation, amount of candy they're going to be getting, and just the excitement. And unfortunately, with excitement, a lot of times comes some meltdowns because kids really, it's weird, anxious kids can't handle happy things. Like they can't handle things that they're really, really excited about because it can create a lot of overwhelm. So you can help with this by kind of bringing it down a notch and kind of structuring the evening. And so tell your kids, okay, we're going to come home. It's going to be 5:30. We're going to have dinner, and then we're going to go out and we're going to walk around for an hour. Then we're going to come back. You want, whatever you're going to do, you want to structure it. Thanks for joining, Lynn. So you want to structure it. And if you have kids who are super anxious and don't do well without a routine, you might even, I know this is going to sound a little bit anal, but you might want to write like a Halloween schedule and put it on your fridge or whatever and just say, this is what the night's going to look like. We're going to do this. And so you're previewing, right? Previewing is such an important thing in general for anxious kids, but don't forget to preview for Halloween. And I would keep the pre-activities a little bit calm if you have a child that gets overwhelmed easily by a lot of sensory stuff. So preview the day, preview the evening, and then let them know what to expect, the time frames, because I know with my anxious kids, they're kind of like, when are we going? When are we going? When are we going? And it can drive me nuts. So if you have a time frame, that can really help. And then sometimes I have, my kids get really overwhelmed with how long are we going to be able to trick or treat? And so giving that expectation of we're going to be trick or treating for this amount of time, that can help too. Thank you for joining, Alyssa and Christy. I appreciate it. And Melena, thank you as well. So that will help with the order. So we've talked about costumes, we've talked about fear, we're talking about routine. Then you also want to talk about them getting, somebody, I can't remember who it was, asked the question, what to do when your child gets hyper-focused and obsessed about their costume and the little details. And I think some of that is helping reframe their expectations. So my 15-year-old actually was doing this, believe it or not. And she was like, I need to get these shoes and I need to have a red balloon. I don't know what, she's gonna be this like creepy mask thing. And I said to her, it's gonna be really dark. Like nobody is gonna see your shoes and you wanna be really comfortable because we're gonna be walking around. So I think when you see your kids really hyper-focusing on the details of their costume, you wanna help reframe it and give them perspective that no one's gonna be seeing it, it's in the dark. Typically, if you're going around your neighborhood. So my son gets really crazy with candy. He has a hoarding type of thing going on. And so last year, I think I took a picture of it and I posted it. But last year he got home, he emptied up his bag and he organized his candy by type. And then he got little baggies. It was kind of sad and overwhelming. He got little baggies and he bagged them by like Hershey's. These were sweet tarts. And so we had like our living room was filled with little bags of organized candy. Very obsessive. So one thing that we did that really helped, and we're going to do it again this year, is have you ever heard of Switch Witch? Has anyone ever talked about that? April said my daughter did the same thing last year. Yeah, I feel like for kids that Noelle won't eat it. She wants to save it. Yeah. So I have a good suggestion for our hoarder friends because that's my son. He will save it. He will save it all year long, and it will be a constant battle the entire year because he'll be like, I want more of my candy. And then you wind up feeling bad because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like this mean mom where I won't let my kid eat their Halloween candy. And with my son, like his head will literally spin in circles when he eats candy. My other two, they can eat candy all year long and their behavior doesn't change. One, obsesses about it, so he'll eat like one little candy at a time. Two, his behavior gets crazy. And so sugar is not his friend. And so the holidays are really hard for him because he is constantly getting in trouble because he's eating too much sugar. So what I do, and I don't know if this will work for you guys, but what I do is Halloween is a free-for-all. And so I know it's going to be a rough day. I know it's going to be a rough night. I don't control his eating. So they're eating candy as they're trick-or-treating. I'm not micromanaging their candy. I will for my Miss Celiac. So my 6-year-old will have to have a different thing going on, but that's not what this is about. But he'll just eat his candy as he goes. And he might organize his candy. But then Tracy said, oh, that candy, my youngest becomes a monster. My son, like, it's so bad that actually my other two kids will be like, no, don't eat it. Because they know that we're all going to suffer. So one night of suffering is fine, but I'm not willing to suffer for 364 more days. Like, that's not okay. So my neighbor introduced me to the idea of Switch Witch. Have you ever heard of that? So it's kind of like Elf on the Shelf, but it's for Halloween. And I fell in love with this idea because in the past, I would try to convince my kids to give me their candy so I can donate it to the dentist. But what kid wants to do that? Like, that's really not a feel-good thing. But Switch Witch, if you haven't heard of it, it's like a marketing thing. It's this witch. It's kind of like the Tooth Fairy or like the Elf on the Shelf. She comes and you leave her the candy and she will switch it for a toy. And so the Switch Witch is kind of like at night, like Christmas Eve, but Halloween. You leave the candy out. She comes, she takes the candy, and she leaves a prize. My kids loved that, and I left it up to them. I said, you can do the Switch Witch. I think you're going to get a much better thing than this candy, but it's up to you. And so sometimes I'm a little bit of a pushover, and I'll say, you can take 2 or 3 and not give it to the Switch Witch, but give her the rest because, she'll still think that's enough for a prize. That is a really good thing that saved us a whole year of trouble because eventually, even though my son had put his candy into little baggies and it was kind of upsetting, I convinced him to do the Switch Witch, and he did, and we didn't have 364 more days of fighting over candy. Can I have more candy? Can I just have one piece of candy? Trying to sneak candy. We didn't have that battle because I went to Walmart. I bought a little toy for him. I bought a little toy for my Miss 6. She was Miss 5 at the time. And boom, it was over. There is a book that goes with Switch Witch on Amazon. I didn't get it. I just said, hey, there's this thing called a Switch Witch. Stephanie says, what kind of prize did you use? I just got a really small prize. I can't even remember what I got my kids. It was not a big prize, but it was enough that they would hopefully want to do it again this year. I honestly can't remember what I got. But know what motivates your kids. It's not Christmas, so it doesn't have to be like this huge, huge thing. But I think something enough to entice them to give up their candy is worth it long term because it's so overwhelming. So look into that. That's an option. I don't know what my kids are going to do this year because my son found out that Santa's not real, and then it unraveled everything, and then he had to share that with my 6-year-old. And so just this morning, she was like, Mom, is Santa real? And so I don't know if they're going to believe in the Switch Witch, but they might believe in the prize that they're going to get. So hopefully that'll be motivating enough. The last thing I want to talk about, and if you have questions as I'm going, feel free to leave them in the comments. I've gotten better at multitasking and I can answer them as I go. The last thing I want to talk about is how to help your kids wind down. And I think that's the hard part too, is they come back, they're all excited, they're wired on sugar, they're hyper, And also they've been exposed to maybe a lot of scary things, because now, I don't know what your neighborhood is like, but there are even like these 3D projectors like in the windows that like, you've got bloody zombies like banging at the windows, and that's like really scary. So they're pumped up and excited, but also their brain is filled with spooky stuff. So you want to have an elongated bedtime routine. And a lot of times, and I've done this before, like it's late, it's like 9 o'clock, or like at my house, that's late for my kids. Let's get our makeup off, let's quickly get into our pajamas. It's time to go to bed. Well, I'm setting them up for failure because 1, their head is full of really scary stuff. 2, they're pumped up with sugar. And 3, they're all excited. So that's not a very good wind down time. So you might want to like intentionally think, okay, we're going to have a longer wind down time tonight because of all of this craziness. So I recommend giving them a bath or a shower, like to calm them down if you have time. That's a really good transition behavior because they're moving out of Halloween. You're winding them down. They're wiping off their makeup. And then they can lay out their candy for the Switch Witch, or because some of us, are just finding out and maybe we won't have a prize, we can start preparing, where you're going to leave your candy for the Switch Witch because she comes on Friday. So maybe give it a day so you can run out and get something. And then you want to have some relaxation when you put them to bed. And I think some guided imagery on Halloween night is a really good thing because their brain is already filled with, spooky stuff. And so I would purposely lay my kids down and I would tell them like a calming story, or if you have guided imagery that you already use, definitely use that. That can be helpful. We use Lori Light at my house, Lite, and she is awesome. But if you don't even have that, you can either download something on iTunes. There's guided imagery for kids. You can even download one episode, like one track that you can play, or do it yourself and tell them a really calming story. But you want that to be the last thing in their head versus something really dark and scary. So those are some of my ideas. If you have questions about something that I didn't touch on that you're like, oh gosh, but this one thing, I don't know how to handle it, leave it in the comments. I'll stay live for a little while just to see if anyone has any questions. And while we're waiting, I want to tell you about something that's happening, that's upcoming, and it's starting to get built, but I want to let you know first that I am working on a membership site. So my membership site is going to be a site that has tons of resources, more videos, professionals are going to come on and do lives. I'm going to have worksheets and stuff that you can just print out, and it's going to be for members. So I'm going to have a private Facebook group that just for those members. We're going to do live coaching calls on how to help your kids. It's going to be a tight-knit community that is going to be working on supporting you raising kids with anxiety and OCD. So I'm very excited about it. I'm starting to build it. And if you think I give a lot to all of this free stuff, it's going to be crazy how much I'm going to be giving in that small community because it's going to be tinier and I'll be able to really get to know your kids and your story and your struggles and help you a little bit more personally. So when I get off here, I'll leave a link to join my wait list because that's not happening now. It's in the future. I'm starting to build it. It's going to take me a little while to make sure I have really good stuff in there. And if you want to join me and be a member for that, you can hit and join my wait list and I'll be sure to let you be the first person to know. So I hope you guys have an amazing Halloween. I love Halloween. It is my favorite holiday. I'm dressing up. I'm going to be a dead ghost bride because why not? My Mr. 9 is going to be death because of course, and it should be very fun. So have a safe, fun Halloween and I will talk to you some other time. Take care. Bye.